Okay, now that we have Visual Studio installed, we're going to go ahead and write our first program. And the program that we're going to write, Hello World, is really the traditional first program that any programmer would write in most languages. So this won't be an exception to that. And the very first thing, so let's go ahead and get started. So the very first thing we need to do is to start up Visual Studio. And if you can see, I have a shortcut here that I'm highlighting that's on my toolbar. But I can also start Visual Studio from the Program Start menu as well. So we'll go ahead and start Visual Studio. And you'll notice that Visual Studio is pretty much like any traditional Microsoft program. There's a File, Edit menu, a View, a Help menu. And what we're going to be interested in right now under the File menu is creating a new project. So we'll go ahead and do that. And you can see also under the recent projects, I've been developing code on this for these different lessons, so you can see my history of different things that I've been working on. So we'll go ahead over here to New Project. And one of the great things about Visual Studio is you can create a ton of different types of projects. In this case, we're going to be creating a console application, but you can also create ASP.NET applications, ASP.NET MVC applications, or for web projects, WinForm projects. You can create services. A recent addition is that you can create .NET Core applications which will run on Linux and the Mac. So that's a recent addition. But in our case, and throughout this class, we're going to be working on console apps for the .NET framework. So I'll go ahead and highlight that. And the other thing that we're going to change then is there's a default name for the project, but we're going to change that. We're going to call it Hello World. Right here. Oh, let me go ahead and fix that just a minute there. Hello World. And you can also tell the location of where you want to put your projects. So in my case, I'm going to create a new directory on my C drive, and I'm going to call it Projects. So I'll select the new folder here. And it really doesn't matter. You can create a folder wherever you would like on your system. I like to create one called Projects because I have done it in the past and kind of a creature of habits, and so it's easy for me to find. But the key things is notice this check mark here is going to create a directory for our solution underneath our projects directory, so it'll create a directory underneath of that. And we'll see that a little bit more later on when we start copying solutions from one chapter to the next as we build onto our program. And also here at the top, it selects which version of the .NET framework we're going to use. And in this case, it's version 4.6.1, which is the recent edition as of the filming of this. So I'll go ahead and select that I'm creating a console app. And that's everything we need right now. So I'm going to select OK. And now Visual Studio will go out and create a stub of a project for us. And here you can see the code that it's created in this file right here called program.cs. .cs for C# is the default extension for C# files. And over on the right-hand side is the Solution Explorer that says, here's all the files in our solution. So our solution is called Hello World. We have one project in a solution. You can have multiple projects in one solution. In our case, most of the time we will only have one project in our solution. And program.cs then is our main piece of code. So the code that Visual Studio has created, you'll notice a bunch of using statements at the top. This defines which libraries that the program is going to use, and we'll talk more about using statements later in the class. You also see a namespace that defines the default namespace for the project. We'll also talk about that a little bit later. And then a class, which is C# is an object-oriented programming language, and so everything is really defined in terms of classes. And we'll talk about object-oriented program also later in this class. The entry point into a console program is always a method called main, and that's where this entry is right here. Also, you'll note in C# that chunks of executable code are marked with a beginning brace and a matching ending brace. And you also see that there's dashed lines showing you how these line up. So Visual Studio will help you line these things up. Beginner programmers often struggle with the syntax of the language, knowing where the braces begin and end and trying to line those things up. Fortunately, Visual Studio has lots of tools to do that. So I'm going to go ahead and create a new line, and I'm going to put in our line to print out our name. So as I type, you'll notice that Visual Studio will try to help me out, and the function that I'm trying to get to is system.console.writeLine, and that function does exactly what you would think it does, is it writes a line out to the screen in a console application. So let me put our message in here. Hello world, my name is Eric. So again, you'll see that the string that I'm printing out is marked with the double quotes matching beginning and end, and this is all defined in the system.console.writeLine package. And as I mouse over these, you'll notice that Visual Studio will give me some messages and a little bit of documentation about how the libraries are structured within .NET. So I'm going to go ahead and select Save All. Visual Studio is generally pretty good about saving changes, but if you're like me and you've lost some code over time, I've become kind of a fanatic about saving things as I work on them, so it just saves for trouble later on. And so now to actually run this program, I'm going to select under the debug. You can start a program with debugging or without debugging. We're going to go ahead and run it without debugging. We'll talk a little bit about the debugger later in this class, but start without debugging. We'll go ahead and run this piece of code, and if everything works right, and it did, our first program is run, and you can see the message up here in the command window. So this window is where our console application will run inside a command prompt. And you'll notice that it also has press any key to continue, which I'll go ahead and do, and that will terminate our program. So again, let's go ahead and run that one more time. Debug, start without debugging. You'll see our message up here. Hello, my name is Eric. Press any key to continue. That's our first program. So now, again, nothing has changed, but I'll go ahead and save it. You can also note that Visual Studio down here in the bottom left-hand corner will give you messages about things that it's doing, whether it's building code or saving files. It will give you a message about that. If by any chance you do something wrong, say you forget the ending parenthesis here, and now I try to run this start without debugging, it says that there is an error right here, and you'll notice the red underscore here. Would you like to run the last successful build? This is no. It will tell you the error line as I'm pointing down here at the bottom. So it says that there's an error on line 13. So I'll go ahead and fix this, and then you'll notice then the error is clear at the bottom of the screen. So even though this is a pretty simple program, there's a lot going on here. We'll run this one more time. I'll save everything to a save all once again, and that's really it. This is our first working program. The lab after this will be for you to go ahead and create that. I'm going to go ahead and get out of Visual Studio at this point. Again, this is a typical Windows program. I can select the close icon on the upper right, or I can select File, Exit, or Alt F4 and exit the program. So that's really it for our first lab. Thank you so much, and I'll see you in the next lesson. Thanks again.